SP, hala. May kausap siya sa taas eh, yung mga tungkol sa soji. Hindi ko nagagalit yun. Anti-soji. Hindi siya makatayo.
Bukas yata yung hearing.
Kaya maghanda tayo. Pero ba't sinabi na sa news, hindi pa kailan nagpulis tayo pag hindi tayo nakaas. Kasi Atty. Sheena. Yung sa tayo. Bababa. Kausapin ko siya, sabihin mo para sa kasi pagbaba ko, pag-grade mo, sige.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us all rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
Urging the DOJ and the NG to
Review.
review.
In the meantime, suspend. Urging them eh. Urging them naman to suspend muna. The 17th session of the Senate and the first regular session of the 18th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Ramon Bong Revilla Jr. will lead the chamber in prayer.
Dakilang Diyos, pinupuri ka namin at pinasasalamatan sa araw na ito. Sa muling pagtitipon namin sa bulwagang ito upang talakayin ang mga mahalagang issue at usapin ng aming bansa. Idinudulog po namin sa inyo, mahal namin Panginoon, na biyayaan mo kami ng dalisay na puso, malinaw na pag-iisip at malawak na pangunawa upang makabuluhan ang sesyon na ito sa pagbibigay ng tugon sa pangangailangan ng bawat Pilipino. Lord, your word says in James 1, verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Lord, we ask you for wisdom. Give us wisdom each day, wisdom to lead this country. We live in a time where there is much turmoil, challenges, pressing problems. And at times, all this can so overwhelming. May we all learn to seek you first before we act or say anything. May we put our people's needs first before anything or anyone else. Our desire is to see our nation prosper and blessed. For your word says in Psalm 33, verse 12, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he chose for his inheritance. You are the way, the truth, and the life. I am a living witness to your truth and how it shines bright over lies and injustice. Shine your truth upon us and the country. So, Lord, strengthen every leader in this house to be men and women of truth and integrity and not be swayed to go either to the left or to the right, but keep our eyes and hearts fixed on you. You are the author and finisher of our faith. We shall put our trust and confidence in you alone. This is our prayer in the name of Jesus, our Lord, our Savior, and our God. Amen. Thank you, Lord.
The Secretary will call the roll.
Roll call of members, the Honorable Senators Angara, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, De La Rosa, Drilon, Gatchalian, Go, Gordon, Ontiveros, Lacson, Lapid, Marcos, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Tolentino, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Soto III.
With 20 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 16th Session, Monday, September 2, 2019, and consider the same as approved.
Any objections? Chair is none. Approval of the journal.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have with us in the gallery distinguished guests, His Excellency Norman bin Mohammed, the new ambassador, brand new ambassador to the Philippines. Mr. President is the ambassador of Malaysian ambassador to the Philippines, and his delegation as well, Mr. President.
We welcome the ambassador and the delegation and all the other guests of the Senate this afternoon.
We also have with us the Vice Governor, Jose Tomas Sr., Province of Nueva Vizcaya, and he is also the CEO of Tam-An Banawe Multipurpose Cooperative of Nueva Vizcaya. They are with us today.
Welcome to the Senate.
And yes, the cooperative is headed by Chairman Melchor Carnate Jr. Mr. President, before I sponsor the two resolutions in amendment to our rules, I move for the reference of business.
The Secretary will proceed with the reference of business. If we are ready.
Reference of business, bills on first reading. Senate number 999, entitled An Act Establishing the National Heroes Council under the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Marcos.
Referred to the Committees on Basic Education and Finance.
Senate number 1000, an act regulating the imposition of any fee for the use of parking spaces and facilities located within shopping malls, hotels, and similar business and/or commercial establishments, and prescribing penalties therefore, introduced by Senator Binay.
To the Committee on Trade.
Senate number 1001, an act institutionalizing support mechanisms for public school teachers and school personnel in matters of student discipline and mechanisms for classroom management and providing for the protection in case related thereto, introduced by Senator Binay.
To the Committees on Basic Education, Arts and Culture, Committee on Women.
Senate Number 1002, an act establishing an accelerated program for the construction of potable water supply systems in every barangay throughout the country for the purpose of promoting rural health, introduced by Senator Binay.
To the Committees on Local Government, Health, and Finance. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that we consider Senate Resolution number 66. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
May we request the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary will read the title of the resolution.
Yes, Resolution Number 66, Resolution reconstituting the Special Committee on Marawi City Rehabilitation.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may be allowed to sponsor just quickly the measure, Mr. President, with a few thoughts on our constituting the Special Committee on Marawi City Rehabilitation. If I may,
All
Mr.
right,
President.
yes, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. We sponsor Senate Resolution number 66 today because we truly believe this is the creation of the Special Committee on Marawi Rehabilitation, as this Senate truly believes that the city of Marawi should go back to its former luster and former glory, when Marawi was once a beautiful city of our republic, Mr. President. After the Marawi siege in 2017 and the fighting that ensued, it left the city in rubbles. And it's been unfortunate that how many years have passed, almost 2 years, that it seems that the development of the area is at such snail-paced. And we'd like to reconstitute this special committee so that we can ignite our oversight functions or start our oversight functions when it comes to the rehabilitation of this once beautiful city of Marawi. Mr. President, I'm quite afraid that if we do not allow or we do not oversee the rehabilitation of the city and we just allow it to be what it is now, it will become another hotbed of insurgency or recruitment facility of the ISIS and other subversive elements of this country, of the government. And the quicker we rehabilitate, the quicker we rebuild Marawi City, I believe the faster we will be able to eliminate radicalism in that particular area of our country. So with that, Mr. President, without further ado, I move that we approve
Adopt.
and adopt Senate Resolution number 66. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Resolution number 66 under Committee Report number 2 is hereby adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will also have to wait for your designation or the chairmanship of the committee at the soonest possible time and the designation of its members, so we can start
talk
hearing
about it.
two of
We can
yes.
talk about it later,
So we
perhaps.
can take up two of the measures that are already referred to this committee, that could be referred to this committee. Mr. President, before I take up the second resolution, I'd like to greet our distinguished colleague, Senator Grace Poe, a very, very happy birthday. It is her birthday
Yes.
today, Mr. President.
The birthday girl has arrived, and therefore we suspend the session for a minute to be
Yes,
able
Mr.
to greet the distinguished lady from San Juan. Session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer, Mr. President, to the calendar of ordinary business to special order PS resolution number 122 under committee report number 3. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to consider proposed Senate resolution number 122. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
Mr. President, we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
The Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Resolution amending sections 13, 10, 13, 14, 20, 25, and 39, Rule 10 of the Rules of the Senate and creating the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation, and Futures Thinking.
Mr. President, I'm honored to report, Mr. President, I move that if I may be recognized to sponsor the measure.
The Majority Leader is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm honored to report the recommendations of your Committee on Rules after several meetings on the subject matter, and in one of those meetings which you personally attended, Mr. President. These are the amendments to our rules, particularly Section 13, Rule 10, or the formation of the standing committees. In amending Section 13, we sought the guidance and institutional knowledge of our Secretariat in rationalizing the formation of standing committees. First, we did a comparison of the standing committees of the Senate and the House of Representatives and took into consideration or used two main yardsticks, parallelism and efficiency. Parallelism means if a Senate committee has a counterpart in the House, while efficiency means if having such standing committees in the Senate, even absent in the House of Representatives, will promote ease and efficiency in doing our legislative functions. The Secretariat also presented the historical evolution of the standing committees since the 8th Congress up to the present. Admittedly, Mr. President, our current number of standing committees is one of the highest since the 8th Congress. We also looked at the jurisdictions of our standing committees if there are possible overlaps, as well as committee referrals or measures that referred to all the standing committees in the past 3 Congresses. Taking those parameters into consideration, the members of the Committee on Rules are now proposing to streamline the number of standing committees and merge some existing standing committees which are having similar or related jurisdictions and subject matter. By the way, Mr. President, this was a point. This was actually the brainchild of our minority floor leader when he said that some of our committees were actually overlapping in jurisdiction. And so we appreciate the insights of our minority floor leader during the deliberations, and together with Senator Ping Lacson, Senator Joel Villanueva, Senator Angara had also attended, Senator Gordon had also attended these hearings. And one time, Senator Marcos also stepped in to share her support and give her support. These are the following recommendations, Mr. President. Number 1, that the Committee on Agriculture and Food would merge with the Committee on Agrarian Reform, which shall now be called the Committee on Agriculture, Food, and Agrarian Reform. Number 2, the National Defense and Security to merge with Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation, which shall now be called the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation. And number 3, Environment and Natural Resources Committee to merge with the Climate Change Committee, which shall now be called as Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Climate Change. As a result of the mergers, we also propose to increase the membership of the affected committees. We are also proposing the creation of a timely and relevant committee, which is the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovations, and Futures Thinking. Did I say that right, Pia? Said it right? Okay. This is in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals target, Sustainable Goals target by 2030. Prior to our streamlining and merging of our standing committees, Mr. President, the Senate had 41 standing committees. We only have 24 senators, actually, Mr. President. With our proposals under Committee Report Number 3, we are reducing this to 39 standing committees, which has been the average of the last 4 Congresses. With the foregoing considerations, I urge my colleagues for the adoption of the amendments to our rules. May we recognize our Minority Floor Leader, Mr. President.
The Minority Leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield to a few clarificatory questions?
Yes, Mr. President, absolutely.
Yes, we put on record our appreciation for the effort of the chairman of the Rules Committee in leading the Rules Committee to do some amendments to this to our rules, particularly on the jurisdiction of the committees and on the matter of trying to streamline. I just have some questions on the jurisdiction of the Sustainable Development Goals Committee. And for example, one of the jurisdiction is to end poverty in all forms everywhere. That is the. Can I have 1 minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The proposed committee will have jurisdiction over, quote, all matters relating to the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Mr. President, the 2030, UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development would include the agenda number 1, end poverty in all forms everywhere. How do we distinguish this agenda from our existing committee jurisdiction of the Committee on Social Justice and Welfare and Rural Development? Second, the second Sustainable Development Goals under the 2030 UN Agenda is to end hunger, achieve food security, improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. This would be covered by our present Committee on Social Justice, Welfare, Rural Development, Agriculture, and Health. Third Sustainable Development Goal is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages, and this is now handled by the Committee on Health. Another Sustainable Development Goal is to ensure inclusive and equitable education and promote long-term learning opportunities for all. This is in our rules. This is under the jurisdiction of education, and so forth and so on. In other words, what I'm saying, Mr. President, is that while indeed there may be some merit in the putting up of this, in creating this committee, my problem is that whenever there is a referral, it would be one of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, and we have already a standing committee on those different development goals. How do we now tackle this issue when, for example, there is a bill or a resolution concerning health? Theoretically, that falls under the Committee on Health, under our committee jurisdiction. But the Sustainable Development Goal also include ensuring healthy lives and promote the well-being of all. So the question I raised to the majority leader is, how do we make this distinction? I know that it was crafted by our technical committee, so for the technical group in the rules. So for purposes of record, for our future guidance, may we know how the distinction will be made?
The way that we will refer the committees, Mr. President, to my distinguished colleague and Minority Floor Leader, is that if the topic is on health, the primary committee referral will be the Committee on Health. And it should be a secondary referral to the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals to assess on how it will fall into the 2030 agenda, United Nations 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So that would be the,
All right, that's good.
way we will act on these referrals.
Wala pa tayong president.
Mr. President, may I also add?
Senator Cayetano.
Well, if that is spread into the record, that the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation, and Futures Thinking would be the secondary committee on all matters pertaining to the jurisdiction of our other standing committees. I have no problems with that, Mr. President. Just so we spread it on the record.
Yes, that is correct, Your Honor, that is correct.
Thank you, Mr. President. So that is the rule that we will follow on a day-to-day basis when we have the reference of business.
Yes, that is correct, Your Honor. Yeah, that's correct, Mr. President.
Senator Cayetano, you wanted to add something, or?
Actually, Mr. President, I just wanted to just put on record also that the ultimate objective of the organizing of this new committee is to ensure that we are cognizant and conscious of the fact that there are goals that we intend to achieve. So to the extent that, for example, in the committee, to follow through on the example given the Minority Floor Leader, health issue, a health bill, the objective of the SDG committee would also the objective would be to put perspective into the prioritizations also, because there are goals that we commit to achieve by 2030, and it would be the responsibility of the committee to at least make sure that the body knows that there are such goals that need to be achieved by way of prioritizing. And also, I'd like the body to take note of the fact that it is SDG, innovation, and futures thinking. So again, the objective really here is to be planning for the future, to think out of the box, to be able to recognize that there are problems that need to be solved today, but we also need to set aside time, resources to solve possible issues that will come up in the next generation. That is something that we tend to neglect, precisely because by nature, human nature, survival, we tend to focus on the problems on hand. So that is how the Committee on SDG, Innovation, and Future Thinking is supposed to assist in the whole process.
Thank you very much to our good senator from Taguig. The way I understand it, therefore, from the way the majority leader responded to our queries, is that in every instance, this new committee will be a secondary committee, because all of the fields that are mentioned in the jurisdiction of the Committee on Sustainable Development would already fall under the jurisdiction of the different committees. So it would always be the committee would always be a secondary committee.
Yes, but unless, Mr. President, the resolution or the bill happens to tackle SDG per se, Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, well, can we have, just theoretically, can we have an example of a bill that would be primarily referred to this committee?
Let's say there's a resolution requesting the Philippine Senate to investigate if we have complied with the Sustainable Development Goals target of the United Nations, so on and so forth. Then that could be referred to that particular committee, Mr. President. But if it's a bill that has something as primary committee, if it's a bill that has something to do with education, for example, expanding the ALS, or the alternative learning centers all over the Philippines, which is also part of the SDG. Primary referral will be the Basic Education Committee, and we can have a secondary committee, which is the Sustainable Development.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you for that response. But if we are to review the compliance of the country to the UN development goals, wouldn't the various committees in the Senate be already already exercised their oversight functions? And for example, if it's regard the Committee on Health, would the Committee on Health not have jurisdiction over the compliance by the government of its commitments on the issue on the field of health?
The problem there, Mr. President, for example, it's too broad. The SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, is too broad proposal or program that it encompasses maybe about 12 departments of government. So if I had to refer it, if there was a resolution requesting government to report on the SDG or the goals of 2030 given to us by the United Nations, I would be in a quandary on which committee that will handle it. But with this new committee, that can take primary referral of that particular resolution only on the review of the SDG. On all other topics, I commit to you, Mr. President, to the Minority Floor Leader, that we will tackle the primary referral will go to the committee that tackles that particular advocacy.
Well, the gentleman, our good Majority Leader, said the problem is that it is too broad. That's precisely my problem. The jurisdiction of this committee is very broad, that it can include every bill resolution filed in this chamber. That's my basic problem, Mr. President.
Mr. President, may I?
Senator Cayetano.
Mr. President, I believe the concern of the Minority Floor Leader is valid because precisely that is the objective of the formation of the Sustainable Development Committee. Many times, and I think those of us who have been in the Senate for quite some time will know that there's really no basis to the prioritizing of the hearing of the bills. It would be the priority of the chair or members of the Senate who would ask the chair to prioritize. The SDG would take a step back and take a look at what are these priorities and recommend. This is done in many other parliaments to ensure that we have a broader view of our priorities. And in most, I believe that the biggest contribution of the committee would really be on goals that are overlapping. So for example, when we talk about education, that will automatically have an effect on decent work and the availability and the progress of the economy, which is a different SDG. But many times, a committee is left within the confines of the bill pending before it, that if there was a bill that said promote a certain subject matter, that is all that a committee chair would be looking at.
So
And the
precisely-
SDG committee is secondarily referred to ensure that we take a bigger picture, including the futures thinking.
Yes, Mr. President, we do appreciate the explanation, and you know what, we're raising these questions because we are a little concerned that there can be confusion in the referral, and we might devote our time debating on a particular referral because of the overarching jurisdiction of this committee. But I take note of the response of the Majority Leader that this committee will, in most instances, be a secondary committee with the standing committees in the Senate on the different aspects of governance, taking the primary role in that referral. With that, Mr. President, we can leave it at that. We have no objection to the passage of this resolution, and but on the record, we will be waiting for the referrals to this that will arise once we have amended this, the rules to reflect the formation of a new committee. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you to our Minority Floor Leader.
All right, Majority Leader, what is the...
Mr. President.
Senator Ping Lacson is recognized.
This is not, I'm not speaking on behalf of the minority, but I attended the 2 hearings to tackle the issue at hand. No? And one factor that we considered in collapsing, I think 3 committees, agrarian reform, peace unification, and another committee, is the number of referrals to those committees. So if the arrangement is such that the proposed SDG committee will only be secondary committee, how many referrals do we envision to be made to the SDG committee? Maybe 1, 2, 3?
Yes, Mr. President, at the moment, I do not know the number. But I know the good senator from Taguig, who is a champion for Sustainable Development Goals, would like to have a referral as well, joint referral or secondary referral to several committees, as she wants to participate in the discussions of these committees.
Can we not just create an oversight committee on sustainable development instead of creating another standing committee, Mr. President?
Prior to my assumption as Majority Leader, I mean, just as an analogy, prior to my assumption as Majority Leader, I recall the creation of the Committee on Climate Change.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's another committee that
That was
we
another committee,
collapsed
yeah.
under
Well,
environment.
There were some of our colleagues at the time who believed that climate change was a very important topic and therefore crafted out a committee, a standing committee that tackled the issue on climate change. And I recall that issues on power generation, environmental issues like reforestation, the Climate Change Committee was also secondarily referred to that particular committee. So historically, the Senate has allowed that type of arrangement on particular advocacies. But there was even a time, Mr. President, that there was a movie, cinema, committee on cinema. No?
Motion
Yes.
picture.
Motion Pictures Committee. I wonder who was the chairman of that committee. But there was a creation of the 8th or 9th Congress where there was a Motion Pictures and Television Committee, which was now actually collapsed into the committee of Senator Bong Revilla, which is the Committee on Public Information and Mass Media. So in this case, we have some colleagues who truly believe on the promotion of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so I make an appeal to my colleagues, Mr. President.
Anyway, Mr. President, I just, raised that issue because as I said, I attended the 2 hearings. And if the minority leader is not objecting to the creation, who am I to oppose? Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Pangilinan,
Thank you, sir.
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm not going to raise any question. I will just make a manifestation. I actually support these amendments, particularly the merging of the Climate Change Committee and the Committee on Environment. I recall, Mr. President, when I was Majority Leader, this was proposed then, and I objected to it, precisely because who is to say that it should go to the Committee on Environment or to the Committee on Climate Change? You can argue either way, and it would really create some problems. But and that's why when it was first brought up 15 years ago, I objected to it. But apparently, eventually, it became a committee. And so I feel this is actually a correction. We are correcting what I feel to be a potential source of conflict and overlapping of referrals. Mabuti na lang, hindi nagka-problema at nagkaroon ng mahabang debate kung dapat ba mapunta yung isang resolusyon sa Committee on Environment or sa Committee on Climate Change, because it can be argued both ways. And so the collapsing of those 2 committees to 1 committee, I think, simplifies matters. And so we support this proposed amendments. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right,
Thank you,
Majority
Mr.
Leader.
President. Mr. President, with that, with the permission of the body, I move that we adopt Sponsors, adopt committee report number 3. Mr. President, I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is to adopt PS Resolution 122 under Committee Report Number 3. Hearing none, the resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to my dear colleagues. Mr. President, we'd like to recognize some more guests in the gallery. We have with us Barangay Marcos Village, Palayan City of Nueva Ecija, headed by Barangay Captain Josephine Guevara is here with us. We also have with us the Vice Governor of Southern Leyte, Christopherson Yap. Christopher Yap. And we have from Tolosa Leyte, Mayor Maria Ofelia Alcantara and Vice Mayor Legaspi. Mr. President.
Welcome to the Senate.
And Mr. President, after the adoption of the resolution, I'd like to manifest that the amended rules be published first on the internet and yes, we have to publish our rules, Mr. President, after this approval and adoption. Yes. So that we can also act on the creation of the committee, Mr. President, soonest, and then we can start referring bills secondarily to that committee.
All right, the Secretariat is so directed to do the same.
I move for a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President.
Is that a 1-minute suspension or is it a birthday suspension of Senator Crespo?
1-minute birthday suspension, Mr. President.
All right, session suspended.
I don't want to get into trouble with you. ng section dito sa loudspeaker. Yes?
Majority Leader, session resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there's a request from our colleague that we change referral of Senate Bill number 209, the primary committee to be the Committee on Foreign Relations and the secondary committee to be the Committee on Public Services. Both chairmen were informed of the change. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
Mr. President, in relation to PS Resolution 122 on our amendments to our rules, I move to authorize the Secretariat to alphabeticize the listing of the standing committees. We forgot to mention that yesterday with the permission of the body, Mr. President, so that this is for easy reference. So now the bills will be down alphabetically written down and numbered, and so numbered, matter of style. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none,
What did I say?
motion adopted, approved.
Mr. President, there's an additional reference to business. I move.
Before
for-
we go to the additional reference of business, just for the record, when we called the roll earlier, I mentioned that we were 21 senators present. No, 20 senators present. The fact is that we were 21. Senator Gordon was standing by the door because he was being interviewed by some
Individuals, media.
some media. That's why he was not here in the hall itself, but he was here.
Yes, Mr.
Just for
President.
the record.
Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
President. We have an additional reference of business, Mr. President. Before we adjourn, I move for the additional reference.
Secretary will proceed with the additional reference of business.
Additional reference of business, bills on first reading. Senate Number 1003, an act amending Articles 29, 97, 98, and 99 of Act Number 3815, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Go.
To the Committees on Justice and Constitutional Amendments.
Senate Number 1004, an act establishing a separate prison facility for those convicted of heinous crimes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Justice and Finance.
Resolution, PS Resolution Number 123, entitled Resolution Urging the Department of Justice and Department of Interior and Local Government to review, amend, and modify the issued implementing rules and regulations of Republic Act Number 10592 to reflect the legislative intent of the Congress with the end in view of upholding the impartial delivery of justice, introduced by Senator De La Rosa.
To the Committees on Justice and Constitutional Amendments.
Wala na. Thank you, Mr.
Majority
President.
Leader.
With that, we have no other matters to take up today. I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, September 4, 2019. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none. The session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, September 4, 2019.